So here's a question for you. Can narcissistic people be resilient? I'm not going to lie, I got this idea from a White Lotus episode from a few weeks back. The scene, if you haven't watched the show, the scene was with this very wealthy and kind of awful family, the Ratliff family. And the narcissistic mother, the one with the southern accent, and whose husband, the finance guy, was about to lose everything and was grappling with his own hopelessness. The upshot of it all was that she said that unless she could keep living a comfortable life, that she wouldn't want to live. And that led me to reflect on resilience, or the lack thereof, in narcissistic people. I almost had to give the character some props for her insight, because she's right. She could not have lived without the money and the status and the snobbery and the fancy stuff and the limitless entitled ability to do whatever she wants and never have to work for any of it. She couldn't make it, and she won't make it. And her story would pretty much end when the money ends. So we can kind of see where this is going to go for her after they leave that island. There was no sense of self in her, just a lot of emptiness filled with trappings and status and comfort. And since that character is narcissistic, she assumes that everyone else is wired like her, which is very classical for narcissistic people, and another great example of low empathy, assuming that other people could possibly never have different worldviews or experiences than you. But then that took me to something beyond this ridiculous character on this television show. Can narcissistic people be resilient? It's tricky to answer that, because resilience in and of itself is a tricky word. The actual definition is, and the Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition is, an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. But we often extend it further to mean stuff like flexibility or toughness or even achievement. But resilience, really at the core of it, is the ability to bounce back from misfortune, to be able to keep on keeping on in the face of adversity, especially if that results in a change in circumstance. And when we use that definition, the answer to are narcissistic people resilient? And the answer to that is definitely not. Narcissistic people are not resilient in that way. There's no flexibility. There's very little bounce back. When adversity strikes a narcissistic person, they do not do well. And this is magnified if the adversity results in a loss of status. For example, a loss of a job or power or a relationship or money or social position. Narcissistic people cannot and will not be able to cope with these situations. Most commonly, the narcissistic person will feel like and tell anyone who will stand still long enough to hear it that they're a victim, that life is uniquely unfair to them. Internally, the shame overwhelms the narcissistic person. Their perfect facade gets dented. The idea of them as being perfect gets dented. And above all else, the loss or the change rips through their entitled defenses, and they learn the hardest truth of all, that they are not special. At that point, with a narcissistic person, we will witness a variety of responses: rage, revenge, calling in favors, manipulating people, and telling them that they owe them. The narcissistic person who experiences adversity will have to experience their powerlessness and helplessness, where you may have been living for years with this powerlessness and helplessness because of this relationship. And narcissistic people simply do not know what to do with that feeling. For a while, they will throw tantrums. And then when it sinks in that there is no fix, the narcissistic person will collapse. And in most cases, actually will not fully recover. The closest the narcissistic person may come to resilience is that they never lose their fight, that they will continue to talk smack about other people, ruminate about everyone who let them down, talk about their glory days. We will sometimes see fallen celebrities do down market D-level reality shows to keep the lights on. And I got to tell you, I kind of respect that. I mean, that might be about as close to narcissistic resilience that we may see. And at least they get lots of attention for it, right? And narcissistic folks can be expert performers and expert show people, if it were. So they will be able to craft a reinvention narrative. And while it may present as something that could look humiliating, some narcissistic folks keep punching and trying to stay relevant. As I said, I do think that that's a sort of resilience. They strangely do keeping on, and they keep getting attention and pitch themselves as a sort of messy kind of hero. But it is definitely not a find meaning and purpose kind of resilience. Or the narcissistic person lives in the past and talks about all the people they know and all the places they've been and the things that they did and the places that they ate. It's sort of a glory days kind of thing. But going back to that idea of collapse, when the narcissistic person has a major fall, loss, or unwanted change or public takedown, many don't come back from it. They may go into hiding. They may look like they've aged 25 years in a week. They may cut off or are cut off from other people and live small lives. Some remain quite bitter, and some may even lose their will to live. And in extreme cases, some may consider to end their own lives. And in fact, I do teach therapists that these big falls are very, very high-risk times with our narcissistic clients, and we have to monitor them very, very carefully for their own safety. It's interesting. Narcissistic people often present as tough, and they may make big ideas into reality seemingly out of nothing. They are fantastical storytellers and big dreamers, and are also willing to bend the rules or the laws to become successful. And as a result, quite often may become quite successful. While most narcissistic people are not on average larger than life people, many are. So they almost feel too big to fail. That they are just merely difficult people who live big lives and that it will never be any other way. We can't even imagine their demise. And the big life is the narcissistic person's identity. So when that gets taken away or life changes in any way that they lose any of that, narcissistic people cannot go with it because they actually are that status and that stuff and that life. Most narcissistic people suck at humility. And humility is how any of us who may have had or have a spell of good fortune may recognize that it may not always last, and it may not even last for long, or that we are lucky that we are having this moment and to appreciate it. And that if it did all go away, or life took a major change, that we'd still be okay because we'd have to be okay. That's humility. And the lack of humility we observe in narcissistic people may be a major driver of why they are not resilient. And when you throw in the natural rigidity of narcissistic folks, the kind of my way or the highway way of being, you throw that in there with the lack of humility, that equation, low humility plus low flexibility equals no resilience. And it's not just big falls from grace. Losing a fortune or losing a big company or being in a public scandal. Sometimes it's the small stuff, the marriage ending, or a business not succeeding as they hoped, or that they age out of their career. And similarly, we see a range of responses, including anger, collapse, revenge, bitterness, but definitely not resilience. You may wonder, really, is anyone graceful or resilient when these big bad things happen? Can a person really be so resilient if they lose so much or everything? Yeah, right now I'm seeing it. I live in Los Angeles. I'm watching thousands of families who literally lost everything in one day be resilient, to heal and recover despite all they went through and continue to go through. They may feel miserable on many days. They do feel miserable on many days, but they keep going and trying and demonstrating extraordinary patience given the circumstances. And I am also watching some narcissistic folks who lost everything in those same fires. And it is painful to observe how they are treating their families and other people close to them. and they are just not able to move forward without lashing out at everyone, as though the fires were targeted specifically at them. And there is no capacity for them to draw together with others or with community or even have empathy for other people's stories. There is a big difference on the responses to this large-scale experience of loss on the basis of personality, but we often don't break it down that way. You know what resilience looks like. You have seen it in people who have lost, like I said, in fires or experienced untimely deaths of people close to them, or illnesses, or chronic medical issues, or a sudden job layoff. I see it in family members whom I'm very close to, and I see it in dear friends. It's not easy, but again, they keep on keeping on, and they still be in the world, and they be empathic, and they grow. These are all people who have experienced severe stresses or losses or shifts in their lives that they did not want. They had period of grief and sadness, and they slowly found a way, despite losing a certain quality of life they once had, or a quality of health, or people they deeply loved and no longer have. All this resilience, it's not really a thing in narcissism, despite the grandiose exteriors and the damn hero worship they get from everyone, despite their grand successes and their big personalities. When it all falls apart, they simply cannot cope. And when all their specialness is taken away, many, if not most, cannot keep going and will often collapse. So next time you think that they are more together than you, think again, especially when real life happens. Thanks again.